Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today we're going to be discussing some of the issues that Bethesda needs to take a look at for the launch of Fallout 76 based on the stuff I've seen in the first week of the beta. Now, of course, it's only 8 hours, so it's not really a whole lot of time, but this is some stuff. This is not like a wish list of things that are going to change the game drastically that I think should be in the game or big fixes. This is stuff that can get fixed within the structure of the game as it currently exists. This is not like, oh, I wish there was settlements and human NPCs. It's nothing like that at all. This is just some basic stuff that I think really needs to get tightened up or just adjusted in general as we head into the launch period. And this is stuff that all can get fixed in the game as it exists. And the first should be obvious. Stuff like this that you're seeing on the screen with the bugged out enemies. This is the sort of thing that really needs to get looked at, and this goes in general for all the bugs in the game. This is just one of the things, and I've heard other people talking about exploding enemies that sink into the floor and explode, stuff like that. Obviously, there's people who've been talking about enemies that have been found just in the T-pose, and that's something that I haven't even seen in a Bethesda game really since Oblivion. So the fact that that's going on in the game is a little bit troubling, and so that's the general sort of thing, like enemies floating around, hiding in the ground, stuff like that. That really needs to get looked at and fixed. And this goes in general for also some of the, obviously there's the frame rate issues that a lot of people discussed, the lag. And I know there's a lot of people that say that they don't have any issues at all, but I think pretty much all the footage that you're going to find online is going to have some sort of lag and frame rate drops, and it's really not uncommon. And I know a lot of people just like to act like it's not happening, but I played my games on the Xbox One X, and I'm having the same sort of frame rate problems that a lot of other people are reporting. And I know some people just don't want to discuss it, but I mean, it's pretty obvious if you look at a lot of the footage out there that there are frame rate drops, and it's stuff that you're going to be experiencing. So that's all this. There you see stuff like that right on the screen where stuff just freezes up, that sort of thing. It happens all the time, especially when you're running into large groups of enemies, or even if there's another player around, which is pretty rare to begin with. But that's the sort of thing. Obviously, bugs is the number one thing that has to get looked at. Another thing that I think needs to be adjusted is something that's more of a overall meta discussion with the balancing of the game, but it's something that I think they can pull off. Right now, I feel like the game is more structured towards being a crafter and scavenging for junk, and I wish that they would kind of go away from the scavenging aspect and maybe go for more of a looting aspect, because at its core this game is a looter shooter and not really. I know there's the crafting aspects, but I feel like right now, even if you just want to play as someone who's going to go around, collect stim packs and food to survive, get some water to survive, maybe cook some food on the go, that sort of scavenger lifestyle, it seems like they still want you to invest pretty heavily in sort of gathering junk and crafting and breaking down materials and all that, because your weapons break constantly, stuff like that. And if you want to have any improvements, it really starts to turn into a bit of a chore where you just got to go around and collect a bunch of junk. And originally people said, oh, well, just, set down your camp and use your stash. But now we know that there is also a stash limit, which is you have a weight limit, so you can't just infinitely hoard stuff. And that's another thing where I think they really should look at, is that amounts to vault space in a typical game. So something like Destiny or The Division, which also has stuff like that. This is just a cap on your vault space, how much stuff you can store. And everyone knows that you have a 400-pound weight limit on your camp when you're using your stash. And so that is something that can fill up really quickly, especially when you're getting drops for weapons and gear. That is sometimes, I've been getting drops that are over 25 levels higher than where I'm currently at, which means I can't use some of this stuff for a very long time. So I just have to sit on it for, who knows, probably dozens of hours of gameplay to get to the level I need to get some of this gear that I've acquired. So if I'm going to be storing all that in a stash that has a relatively small weight limit, that's something that I think really needs to get balanced. And if you're going to be relying so much on the crafting systems and everything else, I wish that they would sort of ease off on that for people who maybe don't want to get involved with the crafting so much and just want to live that sort of scavenger lifestyle. I think there's a lot of people that would prefer that sort of gameplay, so I wish they tweak the balance just a little bit, maybe drop a little more loot, and maybe not have to worry so much about crafting to get stuff. And buying stuff at the store, quite honestly, is just, it's ludicrous the amount of caps they want to buy pretty much anything at the store, because you barely get caps in this game at all. So overall, just the balance of drops is something that really needs to get tightened up, because right now it seems like you're pretty much pigeonholed into having to do some sort of crafting, even if you don't want to. I think that maybe a more scavenger lifestyle would appeal to a lot of players. Something I think they can look at. Now, something else that is going to be critical to the success of this game is the enemies, obviously, because most of what you're doing in this game is shooting enemies and fighting groups of enemies. So one of the things that a lot of people have discussed, and that I've found issues with myself, is sort of the enemy intelligence, the AI pathing. Sometimes the enemies will just disengage in the middle of a fight. Now, that's something that can sometimes happen in an MMO style game when there's constantly enemies respawning and refreshing. Sometimes the AI just sort of bugs out, and I've noticed it quite a bit in this game. Sometimes enemies will disengage, you'll get them down to half health and they'll just start running away for no reason. That's not typical in a Fallout game. I'm not sure that that is what they want to be happening. And something else that I've noticed, which is also something that you run into in an MMO style environment, where they're constantly having to repopulate these zones with enemies on the chance that someone else is coming along, is sometimes you're going to run into locations where there's an overwhelming amount of enemies, and it seems like sometimes the spawns are stacking on top of one another without the enemies that are previously there being fully cleared out. Now, this is something that can happen quite a bit. Like I said, I've seen this in other games of this type, but it seems to be especially pronounced in Fallout 76, and it sort of can sometimes lead to a clown car type moment where it's just like, how many enemies are going to come out of this one door? And there's a scene coming up here where you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't know if this is a situation where there's extra enemies because there's other people that are also in this location. That could be it. But I've also run into this sort of thing when I'm the only one around. So I think this is more an issue of enemy groups stacking one on top of each other, and this is something that can be really frustrating. I know Elder Scrolls Online, I've seen this happen quite a bit, where sometimes you'll go into an area, maybe someone had rushed through earlier and it spawned a wave of enemies, and then you come in later and there's another wave, maybe a timer went off, there's some sort of error there, and you'll sometimes see 2-3 groups of enemies just stacked one on top of one another. And I think this is something that's happening here, because as you'll see throughout this scene, and I might even cut this short because it's kind of long, these super mutants just keep coming out of this door. And I've never encountered any Fallout game where there's this many enemies that just keep coming out of one location. And like I said, I don't know if this is because there's other people in the room with me, or if this is a sort of an error with the loading of enemy spawns. So that's something that I don't know if this is something that is intentional or not, but it is sometimes ridiculous, because you'll see right here about 25-30 enemies just keep coming through this door. It gets to be ridiculous. My weapons start breaking. I'm using stim packs to heal up, and it just, I mean, obviously there's some action going on the screen finally, which is nice to see, but I'm not sure this is the intentional way that they want this to be. Maybe it is. I don't know. But this is something that might need to get looked at, because yeah, look right there. I mean, they just keep coming through that door. It's absurd. So that's all I got to say about that one there. But moving on. Something else that I think needs to get looked at, and this is something I'm not even sure if this is something they can really fix, because this might be more of an engine problem than anything. I'm not really sure. I'm not really technically savvy enough to know the answer to this. But the nighttime lighting can be extremely difficult to see what you're doing a lot of the time. And now the area I'm in right now is sort of a blasted out area. This is much more of a wasteland area than you might find in the rest of the part of the map, so it's going to be dark anyway, but during the day it's bright enough. But at night it can be pretty hard to find your way around, and this is emblematic of most of the map. At night it can be hard to see, even with your Pip-Boy on, and I don't think that it would hurt them to maybe get some of those god rays going, get the moon going or something. If the sun's going to be up during the day, why can't we get the moon going at night? You know, let's get some of those lighting effects going, because during the day the lighting effects seem to be relatively okay at this point. I still think they might be a little bit better in Fallout 4 when I'm seeing it on the Xbox X, but I think that the god rays that they have during the day look all right, but at night they just doesn't seem to be any sort of light coming from the sky at all, and it really makes things dark. And you could say, well, that adds to the game, but in this case, I don't think it does. Some games do it well, such as Dying Light did a great job with using the nighttime to its advantage and really added to the game. In this case, I think it just makes it a little bit more frustrating to play sometimes when you can't really see what you're doing. Now, when you're watching footage, it might not be that bad, but when you're actually trying to aim at these things, these brown and gray things that are going into a brown surface, it can be kind of frustrating to aim at some of these enemies. And that's just the sort of thing I'm trying to talk about. You see, this is the same area now during the day. You see, it's all brightly lit. You can see what's going on. And at night, it's just not the case. You wouldn't be able to see these enemies coming at night. And once again, you could say that just adds to the atmosphere, but I don't think that it does a very good job. The Pip-Boy does not provide enough light. You can't really see what's going on in front of you. And I view this more as a problem than something that adds to the game, more as far as atmosphere goes. And I don't know if that's something they can necessarily fix. It might be sort of an overall problem with the engine that they can't fix, or maybe that's just how they want to do it. But if it were me, I'd like to get a little bit more light coming from the sky at night so I can see what I was doing. It's not a problem in Fallout 4, and I think if they adopted a similar type style at night, it would be a little bit better. Now, that's just a couple of things that I think Bethesda might want to look at, some things that need to get improved, maybe a little bit of rebalancing that goes on with some of these things, and definitely the bugs. Definitely some stuff that needs to get fixed before the launch of the game. How many will they be able to fix? Not really sure. Probably not too many, but we'll see how they do. Anyway, so the PS4 and PC beta open up tonight, joining alongside Xbox One, so we'll see how it goes. Now, I'd be interested to see how the game runs on PlayStation overall, because we know Bethesda has a history with Sony game, or the Bethesda games not running well on Sony's hardware. So I'll be interested to see how that all shakes out. But anyway, so let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm sure plenty of people have an issue with everything that I said here, and some people probably agree with a few things I said. I know that I've seen other people expressing some sentiments about a few of these issues already, so I'm sure there's some people that agree, but as always, there'll be people that disagree with me vehemently. So let me know what you guys think. I'm Coach Toolshed. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel moving forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11.